the one thing I learned from doing Syria for years is a bad policy, if the entire international community supports it, is better than three good policies that cancel each other out. And everybody, Trump is basically the last to get on board with al-Sharaa and the new Syrian government. The Turks, obviously, the Arab states, and the Europeans and the UN are all supporting this guy. So it's good that we got on board. And even the Israelis are changing their tune with al-Sharaa. So it's all good.
President Trump has called the lifting of US sanctions on Syria an honour which will give the country a chance for greatness. The US president has been meeting the new leader of Syria, who spent years imprisoned by US forces after he was captured in Iraq. Ahmad al-Sharaa was named leader in January, a month after his insurgents deposed President Bashar al-Assad. The former US Secretary of State Antony Blinken was on John Pinar's programme on Times Radio yesterday. He said Donald Trump is tactical when it comes to his relationships with world leaders.
My sense is that as President Trump looks at the world, there are a couple of things he looks at. He looks to, from his perspective, strong leaders or strong countries. And the leaders that he sees as strong leaders are Vladimir Putin, Xi Jinping,
yes,
maybe Modi in India, Erdogan in Turkey, MBS in Saudi Arabia. Honestly, when he looks at Europe, I think he sees a continent that's not strong, that from his perspective, that's not united, that's a weaker actor. And
well, OK, that was former US Secretary of State Antony Blinken. We can now have a word with James Jeffrey, a former US special representative for Syria engagement and a former special envoy to the Global Coalition to Defeat ISIS. He is now chair of the Wilson Centre's Middle East programme. Mr. Jeffrey, good afternoon from us in London. Do you agree with Antony Blinken's assessment of Donald Trump's way of looking at the world?
Absolutely. And the point is that not just Trump, but the first Trump administration, Secretary Pompeo and then Secretary Blinken, were indirectly supporting al-Sharaa and al-Jolani in Idlib, partially because he was supporting 3 million internally displaced people that otherwise would have been refugees. And he was effectively, as we saw, fighting against Assad and the Iranians. So we saw him as a good bet, even though he had a terrorist background.
That's really interesting. So there has been a relationship of sorts between the US and this man for quite some time.
Absolutely. It was indirect during the Civil War, but the Biden administration, Blinken in December, reached out directly with an envoy to Damascus. The Trump administration was initially, believe me, very divided. Israel was very much against this, but then it looks like Donald Trump decided that he could bet on this guy. I think it's a good bet, but nothing is certain in the Middle East.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you. He might be a good bet this week. Is he a good long-term bet, or is it just impossible to say?
It's impossible to say, but the one thing I learned from doing Syria for years is a bad policy, if the entire international community supports it, is better than three good policies that cancel each other out. And everybody, Trump is basically the last to get on board with al-Sharaa and the new Syrian government. The Turks, obviously, the Arab states, and the Europeans and the UN are all supporting this guy. So it's good that we got on board. And even the Israelis are changing their tune with al-Sharaa. So it's all good.
Is it really then that everyone's just being fiercely practical and there's just an acknowledgement that a Syria in chaos is literally good for nobody?
Right. And many of us who spent years literally in the front lines under fire in the Middle East have learned that practical makes sense. Idealism is a way to get yourself in deep trouble and turn off your own population and solve nothing. So I think that being practical is good.
So who will now emerge as the biggest influence on this emerging Syrian state?
Bingo. That's the big question. There will now be a rivalry between the Saudis, who arranged the meeting with Sharaa, obviously, the Turks, whose first supporter, but I followed that closely. The Turks were always ambivalent about him. And now Donald Trump. So that will be very interesting. But don't rule out totally the Russians. The Russians are negotiating with al-Sharaa to keep their bases, even though they were bombing the hell out of his movement up until a few months ago.
Will they allow the Russians to keep those bases? Surely the West doesn't want them to keep them.
That's an interesting question. Everybody is seeing this as a pawn in bigger issues with Russia. Don't rule out the possibility, okay?
Right. I mean, this is such a complicated but absolutely fascinating area. What about the idea of Donald Trump being able to get Syria to resolve its tensions with Israel? How likely is that?
Well, you may have seen the Trump-Netanyahu interview in the Oval Office where Netanyahu raised this, and Trump said, "Look, Erdogan is my go-to guy, and you got to be reasonable, Bibi." And he said that 3 times. So for Trump, that means he wasn't thinking Bibi was reasonable. And the Israelis, as I said, have changed their tune in the last few days. This is very good. They're talking to the Turks about deconfliction, and they have signaled they're willing, perhaps, to deal with al-Sharaa. And al-Sharaa has signaled he's ready to deal with him.
Yeah, but what does he want from Israel exactly? Do we know?
Yeah, he wants Israel to pull back from the territory they've seized in December, and then at least open for theoretical discussion the future of the Golan Heights, which the Israelis, of course, have incorporated into Israel some time ago.
I see. And do you think that is plausible in the near future?
Talking about it is plausible. Giving it back to Syria is not plausible because it is truly strategic military terrain. And the Israelis learned the hard way in 1967 and 1973. They have to hold it.
What about the idea that I say we as the collective West, if you can call it that, want al-Sharaa to take control of ISIS detention centres? These are these sprawling, pretty hideous camps which contain some entirely innocent children and some potentially very dangerous people. Do you think the current Syrian regime is capable of maintaining these places and ensuring the safety of, well, us and everybody within them?
Oh, I know that issue very well from being on the ground in those places. Slowly but surely, because the other actor, of course, is the Syrian Kurds that we have allied with in the fight against the Islamic State. They're also, of course, an offshoot of the PKK, but interestingly, the PKK has just given up its 40-year war against Turkey. I mean, I want to underline here, what Trump is doing is catching a wave in the Middle East of extraordinary changes that, if we all play our cards right, will produce for the first time in a very long time a more stable and peaceful Middle East. So let's keep our fingers crossed.
So, I mean, you're quite clear there that you believe he's catching the wave. This isn't something that he initiated.
No, actually, it was the Israelis and Joe Biden who initiated the defeat with some help from the Turks in the end and the Arabs, the massive defeat of Iran and its proxies throughout the region over the past year and a half. That set the stage for all these other developments.
But Donald Trump, he's never, shy about claiming the credit. If good comes of this, he is going to claim all the credit, isn't he?
Absolutely, and more power to them. All presidents, and I've worked for a number, will claim credit. And God bless them if they're doing the right thing. And on this, Trump is doing the right thing across the board. The deal with the Houthis, the negotiation with the Iranians, stating that we don't have permanent enemies. I mean, he's really on a roll this week. Add in Pakistan and India and a few other things, Ukraine, and yeah, he's in high cotton, as we say here.
Yeah, I mean, we try to be realistic, and it's clear that potentially, as you say, some good could come out of this. But I've got to put it to you that there's plenty of talk about, shall we say, members of Donald Trump's family benefiting hugely from this trip to the Middle East. All the tech bros are there as well. And then there's the idea of this incredible gift of a plane from Qatar. Is that all right?
The Davos class, of which I'm a member of international progressives, shake their heads and such. But almost nobody in America cares about this, and a very strong minority want to see deals for U.S. firms. And as I said, nobody Donald Trump cares about is going to look askance at this.
Thank you. Well, you've made that very clear. Thank you very much indeed. James Jeffrey, former US Special Representative for Syria engagement, former Special Envoy to the Global Coalition to Defeat ISIS. Now he's chair of the Wilson Center's Middle East programme, and he thinks that maybe some potentially great stuff will come out of all this.
It's an interesting thing that he said at the end, though, isn't it? Because an interpretation of that would be government by the few, for the few, which is not something that's really been the slogan of First World democracy for a while.
But the thing is, I guess we are a pair of gibbering liberals, aren't we? And there's a lot of pearl clutching about some of the antics of Donald Trump and his cronies. And maybe we need to be completely clear-sighted about some of the other side of this. As you know, I'm no apologist for Donald J. Trump. Never will be.
I think it's important, though, Jane, not to, just park everything in that if you don't agree with Donald Trump, it's because you are from this certain tribe. I think so many people who voted for Donald Trump at the last election, who came over to his side with the promise of a better life for their children, for jobs in industrial towns that have died a death, where 3 generations of people haven't worked, a simple fact that your shopping basket might be cheaper, that he was going to help you. They haven't had their lives changed yet. They're not pearl-clutching liberals parked in a different country with a platform to shout loudly.